That's really cute. They just chomped down on that.
I know, look at that.
Hey folks, Chris here. The last video that I did, I talked about going from Kanab into Cedar City, and I have now arrived back into central Utah. I took an interesting trip up to right the very middle of Utah. My mom lives right in the middle of Utah in a little rural area. And I wanted to do another bit of sort of exploring and not take the route that I've taken before. So after spending a little bit of time in Cedar City, taking care of some things, running my scooter around town, running errands, I actually got some brake work done on the front brakes of the RV. When I was coming down out of the mountains, I noticed that I was hearing some telltale signs that maybe the front brakes were needing some attention. So I went and had the pads replaced. So I got some stuff done in Cedar City. And I have to say, it was kind of fun to go back into Cedar City. One of the things that I've noticed is that as I've been doing this traveling, I would spend some time in a city, kind of live there for a week or two or whatever, and kind of get to know the area and go to the gym, and you see people that you've seen, you start recognizing people, and then I would move on and I would go someplace else and be away for a while. And then I found that it was fun to come back to an area that I had already been in. It was like a little bit of a homecoming, just like a little mini homecoming. One of the interesting things about having been in Cedar City was that I knew where I could go park. So there was a Walmart there was a Home Depot, literally sharing the same parking lot. And I had stayed in both of those, but they were noisy. And so I had found some street parking not far from there. And again, it was kind of noisy. And so I did some exploring and found another place to park that was just far more awesome in terms of being a little bit more secluded and just street parking that was quiet, off the beaten path, but still really near stuff. So the next time I go down, I know exactly where I can go that's going to be fantastic. So I decided to leave Cedar City, and I got onto the main I-15 corridor that goes up and down Utah, and it's basically the main thoroughfare for traveling from north to south in Utah. But Utah has other ways of getting around, like many states do, and there is an alternate route that goes basically north to south that is essentially parallel to the I-15, and it is the I-89 corridor. Now, I had gone up that I-89 corridor just a little ways from Kanab in order to get to Cedar City, and you can take these routes that basically traverse from one to the other. And it was something I had never done before because I'd always played it safe and gone through the standard routes. So what I had decided to do was go a little ways up I-15 because Cedar City is right on the I-15 corridor. I went up a little ways, and then I found on Google Maps another one of those interconnecting thoroughfares that go from I-15 over to 89, and it was the Route 20. And looking on Google Maps, it looks really boring. Google Maps does not always portray exactly what you're getting into, which is kind of part of the fun, to be honest. And so I found it. I got off on the Route 20 from I-15 and started going across it. And what was not apparent was that there was a fair elevation shift. It kind of looked like I would just be going through a valley between two national forests, but it turns out that there was quite a bit of climbing to do. And, you know, my RV struggles up hills, and so I was going pretty slow, but, you know, that's okay because it allowed me to sightsee. So it turned out to be quite scenic. By the time I got through that I-20 route, and intersected again with the 89, I stopped at this little gas station that was awesome. It was also a little RV park, and it was just kind of fun to stop right there. And got back on 89 and started heading north. And all the way up and down, that I-89 is just much more scenic and picturesque. So I'm glad I took it, because you twist and you turn and you go through these little valleys. Pass through little towns that are interesting, and I kept wanting to stop. And just sightsee. But I had to get up to my mom's place before sundown, and so I was fighting light a little bit. Incredible. It's just all the way up and down. You're going through areas that are quasi-desert, but you're also going through areas that are green. So if you ever are going to do Utah and you want to go north to south and you want it to be scenic, take the 89 route. It is far more interesting than the I-15. So I was getting to the point where I needed to get to my mom's place, and you eventually go from the I-89 and you intersect with I-70. So I-70 is a route that will take you east to west, and it will take you all the way over into Colorado, and it's where you would go over to Moab, for instance. So you temporarily go on to the I-70, and then I-70 eventually drops you into a little town called Salina, and a little farming community and farming valley that by the time I got there at dusk was absolutely picturesque. It was just incredibly beautiful. There was some weather moving through, so the clouds were interesting. Yeah, it was beautiful, and it was very pastoral. Just the colors, the way the colors were emerging that time of day. So I timed that really well, thankfully. So I eventually got into where my mom lives, and I stayed there for a couple of days. And it was fun because they live in just this small little community, and there's a lot of farming, and the people next door have farm animals. So I went out and I played with the farm animals, and they have goats and duck and geese, and the geese were loud and annoying, and they're not very friendly critters. And they have a couple of pigs that were there, and the goats were really friendly. Though they had a couple of much younger goats who just loved interacting with me, and those were so much fun to go play with. And it was just a really beautiful area. So I stayed there for a couple of days, and then I needed to get back to Utah Valley, and I ended up continuing back up the I-89 route, because the I-89 route, you get off the I-70 and you go back onto I-89 and you start heading north through a little area called Manti. Now, a little town called Manti. Again, just these little villages that you pass through, farming communities. It's just very, very rural. And by the time you get to Manti, Manti is interesting. When I was a kid, my parents bought a little summer home, which was basically a pioneer era little home there. And my dad had taken a picture of me in the barn way back in the 70s, and that turned out to be just an incredible photograph, and it was in Manti. Manti has an amazing piece of architecture there. The Mormon Church had built various temples back in the 1800s throughout Utah, and as a kid, that was the one from an architectural standpoint that I just loved. I just thought it was the most interesting, and it was the most well done. Frankly, I kind of thought that the Manti or the St. George Temple was a little bit boring. But it was fun to go into Manti and drive down the main corridor, which I remembered in my memory. And there was a little ice cream shop that my dad took us kids to, and it's still there. It was awesome. So I got back on the I-89 route, and I just kept going north again. And it was, again, just incredibly beautiful rural scenery as you're driving up, and you pass through areas that are filled with purple flowers and interesting trees and farming, and mountains just right off in the distance that are still snow-capped, and you pass through these valleys that again kind of look like they belong in some little European country. Right, like in the Alps. I mean, it was just like that. And the fact that there was weather moving through just made it all the more dramatic. So I eventually got onto another thoroughfare that then drives you back down into Utah Valley. And again, just more absolutely picturesque scenery passing through that area. So I have arrived back into central Utah where I am right now. And I'm going to be here for maybe another week or two while I prepare myself to start the next leg of my adventure, going up to the Pacific Northwest. But for now, I just wanted to do a vlog entry about my travel through central Utah. And if you've never been to central Utah, there's a lot to see. And Utah is an incredibly varied state in terms of its geology and the kind of and types of scenery that you're going to see. And the I-89 route is definitely one that you should take if you want to see scenery in Utah. So anyway, thanks for watching.